Change. Change may be life's only one true constant. Just as soon as we discover a certain reality and we get acclimated to how things are, we realize that everything is shifting and falling apart. Well, we know this with our brains and our heads. It's difficult to remember and practice this fundamental aspect of reality in our lives. I guess this really isn't too surprising, because we all know that change is so upsetting. Change forces us into spaces of uncomfortable unknowing. Parenting, of course, makes this all too clear. Right before our eyes, we watch as our children morph from crying babies to laughing infants to willful toddlers. I'm so grateful to have Jessica, who's been sharing her wisdom with all of this experience with us in her preaching recently. It's delightful to again see the world through the eyes of a child and hear of a mother's worries and wonder. And it's certainly easier to learn and embrace change when someone else is experiencing it. When we're in the midst of them changing moments ourselves, the unknown of the change too often shuts us down to the joy of wonder. Yes, parenting is one of those gifts that keeps on giving. And while the rate of change may slow down as our children grow, they continually do so and upset the reality that we come to know and love, even if not quite as frequently. As the saying goes, little children, little problems. Big children, big problems. In just 10 days, my baby that I used to cradle in my arms, all 6'1" of him, will turn 16. And he'll take to the road. What an exciting and terrifying notion. It gives me a lurching feeling in my stomach. And I'm not referring to the fact that he'll be driving, for I am fully confident that he'll be a capable driver. In fact, we've already been driving a little bit in parking lots. And he's responsible, smart, intelligent. He'll have no problems on the road. No, what makes my knees start to buckle is the way the reality that I've come to love and cherish is all about to change in a big way. As we've begun to put college visits on the calendar, I've been prompted to realize that in a few short years, Willow and I will be empty nesters. I can't even begin to fathom what that change will look like or feel like. As we watch our children develop and grow, it's easy to imagine that life is an unfettered forward progression of learning, skill acquisition, mastery, and then success. Teachers believe that, right, Amy? This seems to be what we like to think about and how we like to think. When our children are young or old, if we think we can just place them in this growth of a normalized scale of cognitive and human development, then perhaps we can gain some illusionary control over the process. If we plan the appropriate enrichment activity or apply the correct targeted intervention, then we can all but guarantee success, right? That's what we tell ourselves. Maybe again, teachers and principals know that to be not always the case. But in this Easter season, when new life is emerging all around us, with little green buds forming on all the trees swelling with so much potential, and daffodils showing their cheery yellow and white faces smiling at us, it's tempting to declare that spring has sprung and to embrace the forward project of new life, imagining that it's not going to snow again. But we're Western New Yorkers, and we know that's not the case. The resurrection reality of Easter is really the invitation to view life not as a process of learning and knowing, but rather to see it as a practice of unknowing. Thousands of years ago, there was once a wise man who taught a group of his followers to open their eyes, to see the world differently, to notice the incessant changing nature of reality, and invited them to see success not as accumulation, the person with the most toys wins, we sometimes tell ourselves, but rather as letting go, as renunciation, as abundant life. He taught them in parables, then opened up a new spiritual path towards enlightenment. Of course, I'm at church, so I'm speaking about Siddhartha Gautama, widely known as the Buddha. One of the core teachings was called anicca, or impermanence. The Buddha taught that nothing in the universe is essential, that everything that comes must also go, that everything that lives must also die, that everything that is created will crumble. Learning to unknow the status quo of what is deemed a successful life of mastery requires accepting this difficult concept and embracing how it radically changes the way one views the world and indeed one's own life. Just as the Noble Truths teach human suffering is caused by our attachment to impermanent things, they also teach us that it's freeing, because to know that even that suffering is changeable and won't endure. These spiritual paths of unknowing and change can be difficult to follow and embrace in our everyday lives. We may know them in our minds, but our practice often clings to control. Even the most dedicated spiritual followers sometimes miss the path to enlightenment and instead decide to create religion. There's a famous story from the 1750s of some Buddhist monks in a Thai monastery who had learned of an impending war. Fleeing villagers had told them that they were right in the pathway of an invading army from Burma that was on its way to Bangkok to overthrow the king. Uncertain of what to do and facing certain annihilation, the monks began to hastily prepare. You see, they had a special, important gold statue of the Buddha that they had revered for centuries, full of artistry and passion and joy, in enshrining the core teachings of impermanence. Stand at nearly 10 feet tall and weighing 5.5 tons, there was no way to move it. And so, perhaps with some deep irony, the Buddhist monks, forsaking the core doctrine of impermanence, sought to protect their way of life and their revered teachings, and began to cover that great golden Buddha with mud and then plaster. As it dried, they took elaborate care to then paint it and inlay bits of colored glass to make it look as if it had no or little value to an invading army. During the invasion, all the Buddhist monks were tragically murdered, but the golden Buddha remained undiscovered. After the conflict, when it was safe again, new monks came and resettled the monastery, not knowing of its secret. Some 200 years later, in 1957, the entire monastery was to be razed and a new one created. And so this yet another group of monks got about the task of moving their important artifacts. One day they were moving this giant clay Buddha when one of the monks noticed a large crack in the clay. And on closer inspection, saw a golden light permeating out, emanating from the crack. The monk used a hammer and chisel to carefully chip away at that clay exterior until he revealed the statue was in fact made of solid gold and worth over $250 million. This parable is widely told to invite us to dig deeper, to realize that we humans often put on layers of protecting mud and clay, to insulate our vulnerability and to keep ourselves safe. As we age and grow, we sometimes mistake the facade for our true nature. We get stuck in the status quo of success and of mastery. This story shows us that we are often clinging to clay in the muck of life, but that we have at our core great worth and value. We've forgotten our innately golden nature. And of course, while that's true, there is a divine spark breathed into each of us and every one of us. I think that such a sentiment misses the deeper instability of the practice of unknowing. For sometimes we get caught up in the resplendent spark of the gold, and we forget to keep unknowing, to stay in this unstable, uncertain present. Like the Buddhist monks, we seek to enshrine our knowing, and we create a false bottom, always formed in success and gold. In the season of Easter, we're invited to celebrate the practice of unknowing in the deeply troubling fashion that it is. In the fragments of stories we have about Jesus reappearing to his followers, we sense just how destabilizing this experience is. Today we hear they were startled and terrified and thought they were seeing a ghost. And then again later it says, while in their joy, they were disbelieving and still wondering. They didn't know what to make of it. It didn't make sense. How could this man that they loved so dearly, who they watched die, be again in their midst? And then out of their midst, just as mysteriously as he arrived. What's going on? What makes the mystery of the resurrection so difficult for us to fathom is that it's not yet complete. It's always changing. I think the resurrection is a master course in impermanence, that nothing in the universe is essential, that everything that comes also goes, that everything that lives must also die, that everything created will crumble. And yet even this understanding is only part of the story, that God somehow makes the chaotic crumbling and the desolate dying into new and resurrected life. A new life that's still emerging, still out of our eyesight, not even really quite able to hear. A new life that is so fragile and so present that we can't even grab hold of it. It's a life that can never be enshrined in gold. And we ourselves are invited into this very resurrected life. But it only emerges when we're willing to embrace our vulnerability and to unknow everything we felt so certain about. All those things we cherish, to open up to the pain and the loss of having a child grow and leave and go out into the world. Open up to the way in which our heart now goes with them out into the world. This is the resurrected life, that we're not tied to one location, but that we are, in a way like Jesus, everywhere. The epistle, I think, really gets into this emerging future, one that's not yet here, that we're trying to somehow make sense of. The epistle says, "Beloved, we are God's children now. What we will be has not yet been revealed." What we will be has not yet been revealed. We only get a taste of it when we participate in it and practice the mystery of the resurrection. Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book Jesus and Buddha, speaks about the participatory nature in this way. Redemption and resurrection are neither words nor objects of belief. They are our daily practice. We practice in such a way that the Buddha is born every moment of our daily life, that Jesus Christ is born every moment of our daily life. When we understand and practice deeply the life and teachings of Buddha, or the life and teachings of Jesus, we penetrate the door and enter the abode of the living Buddha and the living Christ, and life eternal presents itself to us. This is what resurrection is all about. Being open and present in all of our vulnerability, in all of our unknowing. This is how we embrace the unknown with confidence. This is how we discover our truest nature, something more valuable than gold. Beloved, We are God's children now. What we will be has yet to be revealed. In this season of Easter, as we wait for further clarity and further unveiling, I invite you to unknow all that you think you know, and to invite God to open your eyes and your hearts and your minds to see again the ways in which God and Jesus is showing up in you. May Jesus be born again and resurrected again in you. Amen.